Hello dear students, classmates, friends, mabuhay! Welcome back again. This is Angel Shares Ragsak. Okay, well, for today's discussion, we would be talking about historian. So, yan na, wala nang patumpik-tumpik, wala nang patumpik-tumpik. Pag-usapan na natin ngayon ang mga historiador. Okay, so usaping pangkasaysayan muli. So, sabi nga natin, pag ito ay usaping pangkasaysayan, this is to inquire and we have to learn, but more on to inquire, especially if you're skeptic or doubtful of whatever things that we would be discussing or what I am discussing. It's okay naman. Definitely, I acknowledge other perspectives. There might be views, perspectives of mine that may not be aligned to yours. It's okay with me. Pwede sigurong sabihin mo rin sa comment section para at least I may acknowledge it. I could also be wrong, but I could also be correct. But what is important is we have to acknowledge multi-perspectivity. Ganun din naman sa history. We have to accept and recognize multi-perspectivity. Kasi ganun din yung mga historiador. Okay? So, history, yan. Diba? We have to inquire, we have to investigate, we have to interrogate everything, kumbaga. Okay? Especially if it is something that makes you skeptic on that particular idea or perspective. Okay, so historian, sino nga ba yung mga historiador? Ano ba ang trabaho nila? Okay, so para mas madalian na lang tayo, usually ito naman yung mga nakikita natin. If you would have to Google it or search it, this sa internet, ito yung basically makikita natin. Okay, historian collects, analyzes, evaluates, and interprets facts. Now, if I say facts here, these are actually the information or the primary sources. Now, you know already what a primary source is. Or if you don't know what a primary source is, and this is different from secondary source, you have to check my previous blogs because it talks about historical sources, the primary and then the secondary sources. So, facts here are mainly the primary sources. E.H. Carr use the term facts, his facts or historian's facts rather than the historian's primary sources. Now, the ultimate, shall I say, the ultimate goal or one of the purposes, siguro one of the purposes na lang of the historians, kasi depende yan kung sino yung historiador na nagsasabi, okay, or nagsasalita. But I think this one, it's one of the purpose or goals of the historian to answer questions about significant events in the past. So, whose profession, who has the credibility, the command, and the authority to answer historical questions. So, basically, these are the historians. Balikan ulit natin, no? Pag sinabing kolekta, ito yung they would have to gather information. Ano yung information na to? Ito yung mga sources. Mainly, these are the primary sources. Okay? Kukolektahin nila ito, tas titignan kung ito ba ay pwedeng i-consider na source para sa ginagawa nila o sinusulat nilang kasaysayan. Okay? Kasi kasama na dito yung once they collect, they have to analyze it and they have to evaluate it. And I think it's not just their evaluation, but also the evaluation coming from their organization or network of historians. So if this network of historians would have to agree that this could be considered as historical fact or as primary source, then they could use it. But if this network or organization of historians dismiss it, diba? So, hindi niya magagamit yun. Kahit sa sarili niya, sa tingin niya, ito talaga yung mahalaga. So, pwede ang historiador, pwede niyang ituloy pa rin yun, but I think karamihan sa mga historiador, they would have to observe or follow the decision of their colleagues, okay, or network of historians. And after collecting, analyzing, and evaluating, nakalatag na lahat, okay na lahat, ang susunod na gagawin niya, i-interpret na niya. So this is actually connecting all the dots, kumbaga. So having all those sources with him, that's the time that the historian would have to reconstruct his or her story, or his or her history, kumbaga, with respect to the significant event using the primary sources. Okay? Ang sinasabi rin ng ibang manunulat at ibang mga historiador, kung ikaw ay isang historian, you should be an enabler. Enabler ng katotohanan, kung ano talaga yung nangyari nung nakaraan. So, sa maraming fake news na nangyayari ngayon, you as a historian should be an enabler of the truth, dismissing a certain fake news. Okay? You have to be active on doing so. So, if you're active on social media and if you're a historian, dapat gawin niyo mo yun na platform para maging enabler ka ng truth. And you as a historian should promote multi-perspectivity. No? Hindi mo ibabox yung sarili mo sa isang perspektibo at hindi mo sasabihin sa ibang tao na itong perspective lang yung tama. You have, this is my idea. If you're a historian, you have to be open to multi-perspectivity. Okay? Kahit na sabihin natin you're a conservative historian, diba? And you have this story, at dapat hindi ka lang nakabox doon. You have to be open. You have to be open to multi-perspectivities. And you, a historian, should critically reflect an existing perspective. If that existing perspective is something that should be, let's just say, corrected, or something that you have to open yourself and you would have to agree upon. So, kung may nasulat ka na dati, but because of this new perspective and you think that that is the correct one, the appropriate one, because of the sources that he or she has already that before you don't have, then you have to be open and perhaps you could revise your story, kasi yun naman ang gusto natin the truth, no? Okay. Balikan natin. So sabi ni H. Carr, the facts speak only when the historian calls on them. It is he who decides to which facts to give the floor and in what order or context. As I usually say to my students, there are sources, many sources, if not all, cannot speak for themselves. So these sources could only speak if they are being used by the historians. Okay, so sabi nga ng E.H. Carr, kahit madaming mga sources dyan, if there's no historian would have to interpret it, that's useless. Okay? Historians are subjective. Okay? If we say subjective, there are biases. Actually, even if you're not a historian, there is or are biases really. So, kung ikaw ay historiador, you acknowledge and recognize that there are biases. The work of historian is really to mitigate bias. You have the credential, you have the command, you have the authority, and you know the processes or the procedure or the method, diba? So in order or having all those things that I've mentioned, diba, kailangan alam mong i-mitigate yung bias para mas paniwalaan ka ng mga taong nagbabasa ng yung kwento ng nakaraan. Okay? Well, according to Edward Hewlett, yun the historian without his facts is ruthless and futile. The facts without their historian are dead and meaningless. So, there's no primacy over one to another. So, historian and the sources are essential if you're understanding or studying history. Okay? According to Prof. Geoffrey Barraclough, the history we read, though based on facts, is strictly speaking not factual at all, but a series of accepted judgment. Whose judgment are these? These are the judgments of the historians. So a network of historians or a group of historians. Okay. So we cannot recall the entire past, hence reconstruction or recreation is solely on the hand of the historian, using available historical sources, specifically the primary ones. The telling or writing of story of one historical event might not be consistently similar to all historians. Differences are inevitable, since history has two important components. Ano to? The historian and his facts. The style of writing and even the use of sources may differ that may manifest on the historian's interpretation. Usually, the component that is being disregarded is the historian. I believe that each historian has its own point of view, a result from his or her upbringing, situations, struggles or life struggles, and experiences in life. Adding more the climate, if I say climate, it could mean political, social, economic, and the like. The time he or she wrote the story of the past. There could be more. It could be, perspectives, value system, the method, the procedure the historian he or she uses in understanding or interpreting and even interrogating the sources that he or she used, even the language or the personality or the style and the school of thought that he or she is connected with. Thus, according to a historian, Edward Carr, history is the unending dialogue between the past and the present. How someone writes his or her story of a certain past event today may not be similar to what is written before with the same historical event. I remember what Keith Jenkins said, that interpretations are framed by power. So, sino yung may kapangyarihan? Siya yung makaka-influence kung paano may susulat ngayon ang kasaysayan. So, parang ano rin to kay UK Prime Minister Winston Churchill, diba? Na sabi niya na history is written by the victors. That's coming from UK Prime Minister Winston Churchill. Dito nga, some say that history is written by the victors. Si UK Prime Minister Churchill ito noong World War II. That most part of it was fabricated to satisfy the winning political spectrum. It may use to shape or reshape a story to side a certain person, party, or institution. Pwedeng sabihin natin na yun ay propaganda. Diba? Itong picture na to nakikita nyo sa screen, propaganda ba yan? Life's unfair daw. So, kung ikaw ay historiador, ay sa tingin mo life's unfair. And if you would be writing, let's just say, a story of the story of or history of the black people in America, diba? And you have backstory in your life that that life is unfair for you. So how would you write it? How would you write the history of the black people in America, diba? So ideally, however, Historians should be independent from any influences. Diba? May it be a person, a party, an institution, a publisher, a friend, anyone, a government, whatever. Diba? Hindi ka dapat nagpapa-influensya sa kanila. Dapat, kung ikaw historiador, kailangan independent ka. So, nevertheless, could there be situations that they might be caught up and dragged down in the name of influence and may start to write indifferently or not in accordance to the result of their in-depth studies? Posible. Kaya nga sabi natin, it's not just the sources that you have to interrogate. You also have to interrogate your historian or the author of that person that you are reading about the things that had happened in the past. Or kahit na hindi nang nangyari nung nakaraan. Kung mga may news ngayon sa social media account mo, maniniwala ka na baka agad. 'Di ba? Lalo na kung you're skeptic or doubtful of the content of that news. So, anong gagawin mo? You have to interrogate your source. And even, you have to interrogate the author of that particular news. Diba? That's why the essentiality to check the credibility of the historians or the person who is writing. This is how we evaluate if among the historians or authors, who among is the most credible and telling a specific reconstruction of the past. Diba? Parang ganito, let's just say you have same sources with you, or two historians have same sources with them, or primary sources with them, but it is inevitable that there might be different views. Hindi lang historians kahit tayo, kung napakitaan tayo ng mga information, there is inevitability and there is possibility that you might have a different view, or you might have a view, and that person, the other persons have a different view from yours. So, ano makukuha natin? Different views na. Kahit na iisa lang yung source of information natin. Diba? Likewise, for a person with an inquisitive mind and values analytical skills. So, sabi nga natin, if you're a person who has this inquisitive mind and you value analytical skills, you're skeptic or of everything, doubtful of something that you think, is it true or is it not? Well, of course, you have to do something. You have to interrogate your source, and at the same time, that person who's the owner or who's actually writing that particular interpretation. So, it is possible to go beyond what the textbook or what the teacher or any medium of information from the past is telling you. Sabi nga natin, everything that you might hear from others, especially if you're skeptic about it, you're doubtful about it, you're free naman to check. You're free to interrogate. You shouldn't be 100%, accepting that is true at all. Okay? Checking also its bias and argument to evaluate its truthfulness. So whether you're a historian or whether you're a regular or ordinary, shall I say ordinary person, you have to check the bias and of course the argument of that particular source of information, and even that person who's actually writing it, whether it is a historian or non-historian. You have to evaluate the things that he or she has written so that you may know its truthfulness. Although, syempre, kailangan it requires due diligence in knowing the truth or in understanding history. Okay? So, sabi nga ni George Santayana din, Progress, far from consisting in change, depends on retentiveness. But we have to emphasize this line. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Kaya kailangan alamin natin yung nakaraan para hindi na maulit yung mga nangyari nung nakaraan. Diba? We could check it. Kasi history, it's a study of changes. Diba? So, there might be instances that historians or investigators use the same historical primary sources, or the same primary sources, or the same facts, but also it is inevitable that they differ in interpretations. And then citing other sources that may corroborate to strengthen their interpretation. So, yeah. Ito yung interpretation mo, tapos anong kukunin mo? Pipiliin mo lang. You would have to cherry pick your sources that would have to align or corroborate your interpretation. Para sa'yo, it might strengthen your interpretation, diba? History is therefore not an absolute science, but a venue for interesting argument and facts that man can think and rethink, understand, and compromise as time progressed. Sabi nga ni paring Karl Marx, kilala niyo ba si Karl Marx, the father of economics? Not the father of economics. Father of economics is Adam Smith, the father of communism. Siya yung father of communism. That's Karl Marx. Sabi niya, the philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it. But this change may mean an opportunity and as achievement and not an object of fear. Diba? Kasi maraming tatakot sa change. Paano yan? History, it's a study. Aside from history, it's a study of past events. Yun yung commonly alam natin. Study of, it's a reconstruction, it's an interpretation. It's not the same as the past. It's history. It's learning or inquiry. But history is also the study of changes. Pero last thing, or last line that I would have to tell you is actually coming from Mark Bloch. Kasi sabi ni E.H. Carr, history should be for better understanding. And I think some historians would have to agree with it. Pero sabi rin ni Mark Bloch, history is an endeavor not only for better understanding, but towards empowerment. Okay? Kaya pag alam mo ang nakaraan, sabihin natin hindi naman yung total past. But because the historians are credible of, sabihin natin malapit sa nakaraan, nangyari ng nakaraan, malamang sa malamang meron din naman tayong malalaman o sa nalaman natin, we might learn from it. And once we learn something from it, one thing that we have to endeavor according to Mark Bloch is for or towards empowerment. Okay? So, so that would be it for today's discussion. It's about historian. Kaya muli, ito po si Angel Shares. Nagulo na ang buhok ko. Ragsak. So, see you again in another vlog. So, as I always say, it is cool to be learned. Ciao. Love you.